Consultus International, we've been around for just over 30 years, to give you an idea of where we come from. Come from a traditional energy procurement background, but about 5-6 years ago we decided to pivot towards net zero as it became clear that the climate emergency would become forefront of businesses and organisations' minds as things change, and clearly there's a big tie-up between the energy world and net zero. But we ultimately decided this year, in fact, that we would set up Consultus Sustainability and actually separate our sustainability business from the main core business. I'm a principal consultant for the business, so my role is to work with businesses directly, so relationship piece, take them through what they're trying to achieve. But we have a team here which is dedicated solely to helping those customers with that transition. So taking them through every step of that process, from initially setting out what they want to do, all the way through to actually implementing their strategy and putting in place the practical measures that they need to get to net zero within their time frame. So I'm here really to lend you the benefit of my expertise and what I hear from talking to businesses about the challenges that they meet, how they overcome them, kind of best practice, the various steps that customers go through, that businesses can go through, and how to effectively put in place an effective net zero strategy. So the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership comes out with some rather grandiose ambitions, and it's easy to say that all businesses should create value while making a fair social contribution with neutral or positive impacts on the natural world. Very, very grandiose statement, very, very much what everyone should be working towards. But you put that in front of a customer or in front of a business, and the question that we hear most often is, so where do I start? And guarantee it, every time I meet with a customer, the first thing they ask me is, and I say to you, what are the problems that you're having? The answer is, we don't know where to start. And that's kind of where we come in, and it is very, very important that customers take not a detailed trajectory, or have a detailed trajectory from the very, very outset, but they take that very, very necessary first step before they worry about what the next steps are. So they take their first step on their journey. For us, and for many customers, we find that transitioning to net zero is a process. So we take customers through this wheel, which starts with the engagement piece, and what is climate change and how you can make a difference. Alignment, getting different parts of the business involved and making sure that everybody's aligned in what they're trying to achieve, and deciding what they are trying to achieve, what their ambition is. When do you want to be net zero, and what the enablers and blockers to achieving your aim. We then help them with the baseline and trajectory, put it all together into a plan, and ultimately the most important piece of all of this, executing on that plan and making sure that everybody is on board with making sure that plan comes to fruition. Yeah. It's very much as I say, a 6-step process. The first half of that, the first 3 steps, is very, very much what we consider to be hearts and minds, before you start to move into the practicalities and the reality of putting that plan into place. I work with a number of stakeholders who have an interest in net zero. I was just talking to one of you guys a moment ago about this. And it never ceases to amaze me when I speak to and get into an organisation how many parts of the business net zero touches without the business realising it does it. It's very, very easy to think, oh, net zero, yeah, we need a net zero supply chain. Undoubtedly, that's a large part of people's carbon footprint, and an important part of mitigating those emissions from the supply chain are a big part of what you need to do. But I also, when I get in front of a room, I find myself talking to HR who have suddenly got interested in net zero because they want to attract the right talent into their business. Amongst graduates, Gartner, who produce obviously market intelligence, well respected, estimate that around about 74% of graduates from university these days want to work for a sustainable business. It's hugely important. We see people in marketing who want to get involved with the net zero pathway. Clearly, selling products and selling your business out into the wider world comes with a very, very positive message if you've got a nice sustainability message that goes alongside what you produce. So marketing like to have a say. Legal, looking at business risks, looking at opportunities, wanting to get involved in the net zero pathway. So it's not just those who you think are the obvious person who needs to get involved in sustainability, but we like to engage with as many stakeholders as we can across an organisation to make sure that we're meeting all of their targets. They've all got very, very different hands in this, and it's about making sure that they're all served, everybody feels part of the journey, and making sure that they can all see what the benefits are of that transition to net zero. It brings huge benefits to all of them. It also helps the poor person within the business who's been saddled with sustainability. We often find that the person who's been saddled with sustainability doesn't have it as a main job. It often goes alongside something else that they've been asked to do. It could be quality assurance, it could be health and safety. We see a lot of health and safety people who also have sustainability, strangely, as part of their job remit. And clearly those people need help to be able to put together a strategy which encompasses the wider business and makes sure that all of these different stakeholders' ambitions are met when it's not necessarily the sole focus of what they do. It's one of those challenges which we help to overcome. When it comes to setting the ambition, we like to understand what the customer's about, and this is something that all businesses should consider when considering a net zero transition. Where do they want to be? Are they looking for a purely compliance form of sustainability, whereby they're just in it to comply with regulations? You take away the business risk of not submitting your ESOS report on time or your SECRA report on time, and that's really the kind of the bare minimum that customers are doing these days. These are box ticking customers. We prefer those who are looking for a proper sustainability transformation. Those who are trying to look at new products that they can produce, that grow through a sustainable business model by working with the right partners, that are interested in the whole ecosystem and partnerships, making sure that everyone grows together and the carbon footprint is tackled that way. And they're ultimately looking to differentiate themselves from the competitors. They're looking for a USP. Sounds very grandiose. And when we actually look at it in a little bit more detail, and you get down to the why are we really doing this? What we ultimately realise is that most organisations are doing it, are in business, or they carry out their function for a particular reason, and their sustainability isn't what they do. Sustainability isn't the function of most businesses at the end of the day. So you get those who are involved in the compliance. It's a little bit of a wordy slide, but those involved in the compliance side of things. But then you get customers who are looking to make a contribution, and they're driven by the desire to compete and a sense of responsibility. They're starting to think about the transition. Where we really like to get our customers to is the competitive advantage. They're incentivised by market leadership. They want to take a driving role in this. They want to be shouting from the rooftops that they've got not just a plan in place, they're putting it in place. They're going to be net zero by 2035. It's all very, very, very positive, very much we are leading the way as far as this comes. And to a certain extent, a lot of the large corporates have already done that. And it's now starting to trickle down into the smaller, into the medium-sized enterprises, and ultimately the smaller businesses as well. They're all part of a supply chain. We don't get many customers for whom sustainability is a calling. At the end of the day, a business is in business to make money, generally speaking. Organisations public sector organisations are there to provide a public function. Sustainability doesn't necessarily have to become their reason why, their full reason why. But certainly getting to the further right organisations can get on that scale, the better as far as we're concerned. We're definitely interested in moving everybody away from that kind of that left-hand box ticking exercise side of things. And it's very, very important that the leaders within the business understand that this transition is necessary. And again, it's about helping those people within the organisation who have the responsibility and the accountability for making sure that this happens, that they get their voice heard within the organisation, within their organisation. We help customers set a vision and mission statement. Now, many companies and many organisations have a vision or mission statement, but what we're now starting to see is they're starting to move those towards sustainability. So how do you move on from from wanting to be the best at something to also wanting to be the best and the most sustainable at what you do? And how does that become a part of your company's DNA? So what do you actually want to achieve? Where do you see yourself as leaders, as those who are driving this change forwards, this much needed change forwards? And how are you going to get there? How are you going to achieve your vision and make sure that you meet it? So as I say, we're thinking back to that circle just a moment ago. That's kind of the first half, the difficult part of the journey. It's not about the practicalities, it's not about what you can actually do from a lighting point of view or ventilation point of view. It's about who you are as a company. It's about making sure that your message is clear, that you have a coherent point that you want to get to. Inevitably, the next question that follows on from that is, okay, so that's a starting point. And you say to a business, when do you want to be net zero by? So with UK PLC, 2050. Can do better than that. And generally speaking, the business will turn around to us and say, well, when can you get us there by? And it's the wrong question to ask. Our view is that the question that you need to ask is, what do I need to get to the date that I set in place? If you don't set a date in stone and make it part of living and breathing your sustainability, you will let that date drift. You'll keep waiting for the magic bullet that comes along that is ultimately going to get you there sooner or later. So we work with customers to say, okay, given where you want to be net zero, you want to be keeping up with your competitors, you want to steal a march on your competitors, how about we look at 2030, 2035? 2040 at a push, and we'll gauge how ambitious that level of ambition is based on where that company currently is and what the environment is like in which that company operates. What's the culture like from an investment point of view? Is your senior management on board with the transition, why you want to get there? Is your operations department on board with what you're trying to do? Does it permeate your workforce? Is everybody in line with that? Once you've set out the attitude to sustainability, put a date in place and we will work out how to get you to that date. Don't let yourself drift. Make a public statement, say we're going to be net zero by 2035 and stick to it. Don't overly commit, but don't undercommit either. So we help customers with baselining as the next natural step. You can't start to tackle something unless you've measured it in the first place. So clearly, working across all of the 3 different scopes, we help the customer put their baseline together. Scope 1 and 2, we find businesses are generally quite good with. So that's their electricity usage, their fuel usage, energy usage, which is in their own control. Businesses are relatively au fait with that. Scope 3, 15 categories across Scope 3. It's overly complicated, many would say, in the world of regulation, but that's how it is. And when it comes to your upstream and downstream activities, how do you get that information together? But that information is generally available. It's available through business procurement teams. It's available through legal teams. Effectively, it's a time-based piece of work to collate that information together and to put some meaningful analysis behind that and to understand exactly where you are. Most businesses, as you're probably aware in the room, around about not 80 to 90% of overall carbon footprint is in scope 3. So without dealing with that part, you can't be considered net zero. Many customers put in place an interim target to deal with their scope 1 and 2 first, and we'll deal with scope 3 as they go forwards. But we would always encourage businesses to take that first step into the scope 3 world. You can always add to it later, you refine it. The data isn't always easily to hand. Many businesses, for example, have an idea of how much they spend on travel, but they don't necessarily record the mileage or how it's done, or which flights were taken to the United States and which ones were taken just to Europe, and how that person travelled. Did they travel first class? Did they travel economy? There's a level of detail in there, but take the first step is always our first port of call, because as I say, generally speaking, you will overestimate your footprint initially, and as you refine it, your number will fall naturally as you refine the calculations. So we prompt our customers really to focus on these 6 different areas predominantly ourselves. So energy we cover off ourselves quite easily, but from a business point of view, from a business action point of view, you're looking at energy reduction measures, renewable deployment, ultimately as a last resort, green certificates, those kind of initiatives. Transport, waste, water, the supply chain, generally speaking, falls into the scope 3 world. Obviously, some transport doesn't. Relatively new to us is IT and software. We have some businesses who are big software users, and they never ever considered the carbon footprint of the data centres that they use. Everything's running through a big data centre somewhere in the Thames Valley. What's the carbon footprint of that? It's a scope 3 emission, ultimately. And there are things that you can do with your IT and software to cut down your intensity from a software point of view. So there are so the net zero journey doesn't just focus on that energy part, which is very, very obvious under scope 1 and 2, but you need to broaden it out into all of these different categories in order to make a meaningful difference. Supply chain is an interesting one, working with some customers, looking at how they improve their procurement processes, their tender processes, their policies, how they engage with their supply chains to make sure that their supply chain is helping them on their transition journey.
Wow.
Making sure that they're working with companies that themselves have a pathway in place. They've already baselined their emissions. You know, if you're buying widgets from company A, what the carbon footprint is of those widgets that you're taking delivery of. It all helps.
Yeah.
The full value chain ultimately leads to you being able to put together an emissions trajectory. So some important things to consider when you're looking at putting together a strategy for net zero is to look at any contributors or detractors there may be coming up for your business. So is the business doubling in size over the next 5 years? That would make a huge difference to your absolute emissions. Are you doing anything that's going to be a contributor? Is the business going to halve in size? Are you streamlining your business so you're going to a two-shift pattern rather than 3? All those different things that can help to contribute towards your net zero ambition. We also have a look at what we call customer measures. So that's things that the customer's already identified that they can do. Lighting's a prime example. Many businesses that we talk to have already looked at lighting. It's a low-hanging fruit. It's fairly obvious user of energy within a building, very, very prominent and in your face. Has everybody converted to LED, for example? So we'll consider the customer measures. We recommend that businesses carry out an audit of their sites to identify what more can be done, to look at the ventilation, the building fabric, etc., etc. And then we also have a list of what we could consider generic measures, and this information is readily available through CIBSE and organisations like that, of things that similar organisations can do. So something that may not necessarily be identified as something specific for your building, but something which could be considered as part of a bigger program of works for given the sector that you operate in, or the type of buildings that you have. And that builds into what we consider to be gateway measures. So gateway measures are things which help you to measure your carbon footprint and also to manage it, start to manage it. So having good data in place. Many businesses say that they don't know how they use their energy. Well, look at if you get good data processes in place and start recording through smart meters, looking at how you use your energy, you can start to manage it. You can start to mitigate. You can move those peaks in usage. You can identify areas of wastage. It's all easy to do. It just takes the time to actually analyse and put some science into the numbers. Cultural engagement programs are important. We believe very, very firmly that, I'll talk about this in a little bit more in a moment, but that a sustainable organisation should have a culture of sustainability. It's part of the business's DNA. Site optimisation audits, make sure all of the existing technology is working as it should. Make sure there's no wastage from that point of view. Our buildings being heated to 23 degrees when 21 is perfectly adequate. And perhaps putting in place central control systems to make sure that once the buildings are optimised, they stay optimised. As I say, we recommend audits that will look at specifically at the building fabric, other things that can be done in terms of insulation, etc., new roofs, new windows, glazing, all those kind of things that can be done. Heating systems. Businesses find that carbon emissions associated with gas usage are the most difficult to mitigate, because there's nothing else you can do with the carbon from those. You could buy offsets, but we recommend that as a last resort. But you can't buy, well, you can buy green gas, but it's not readily available in the UK as things currently stand, and it's exorbitantly expensive. So other different ways that you could heat your building. Could you look at air source heat pumps? Could you look at potentially biomass boilers instead of gas? Depends upon what, it's horses for courses. It depends upon who the customer is and what they're looking to do. Lighting, as I mentioned, the use of LED and lighting controls, very, very important, making sure that lights go out and that occupancy controls are put in place. Looking at ventilation, looking at motors, making sure that all of the most energy efficient motors are in place, and that the building is meeting all kind of legislation with regards to the minimum standards that that buildings should be built to these days. Retrofitting, making sure that buildings are optimised to run as efficiently as possible. And as I say, there are those generic things, non-site specific. They can be applied based on building type and use. So are there other things that may apply? Over-door heaters and all sorts of weird and wonderful things that might appear. For us, cultural engagement is a cornerstone of a good sustainability strategy. We recommend that our customers get everybody involved, top to bottom, bottom to top, in the sustainability journey. Holding stakeholder workshops on a regular basis, making sure that everybody knows the kind of organisation that they work for, what the goal is, what the strategy is to get there, and it's to begin the process of creating that culture of sustainability I mentioned just a moment ago. And that's not something you do once and walk away. Businesses do have churn, people come and go. Organisation, 18% I think is the average churn rate of employees across businesses on an annual basis. So it's an ongoing thing. It's something you have to return to time and time again, making sure that the message is drummed home, not to new starters and also the existing workforce. Ongoing training, it's about embedding the best practice across the company, sharing the knowledge of up-to-date processes and the role that each person plays in the delivery of the carbon goal. And very, very important that we feel that it's important that everybody knows how energy is used within the building that they work within. What are the major sources of emissions in this building? And we have a piece of software specifically here within Consultus. We have training modules attached to it, which basically ensure that everybody who works here can do a virtual walk around of this building and identify all of the major energy use areas of this building. So they can start to think about what they do, turning the lights out before they leave the building. And we ask all of our employees to make a commitment based on that training. Think about what they can do to help Consultus be the sustainable business it needs to be. And finally, we recommend that every business should have sustainability champions. So that's about sharing responsibility with the stakeholders across the business. It gives the employees a voice and allows them to share their ideas. It's important that the culture not only identifies what that sustainability is, the culture, but that everybody can contribute to it without fear of being shot down. If Joe Bloggs on the shop floor has an idea of something that might help the business, he shouldn't be afraid of raising that idea to senior stakeholders within the business. There should be a channel in place that allows him to do that, and his ideas given due consideration in the overall workings of the business. But yeah, this all comes together in a kind of, well, it's become kind of a ubiquitous term these days, but into a pathway. So it brings it all together, wraps everything up into a strategy. So it's all about the setup initially, understanding where the customer is in their journey so far. Where are they as an organisation? Baseline, as I say, if you can't measure it, then your information is of a meagre kind. Lord Kelvin said that, I think, who created the Kelvin temperature scale. Have a trend check, see what your current trend is. Most businesses will find, if they look at their trend in their carbon footprint over 3, 4, 5 years, COVID aside, they're never going to get to net zero. They need to change something. You have to change something. You cannot simply get there by hoping for and wishing for it. Setting the vision and mission, as I say, in the level of ambition. Be bold is the kind of message behind that. We then look at, as I say, taking those measures, the resource analysis, what's available, what are the enablers and the barriers within a specific organisation. The initiative analysis, spend some time looking at what different lighting will save in terms of your carbon footprint. Build the business case. Map those actions out into a coherent plan. If you want to be net zero by 2035, you're not going to rush at everything in a single day. It's never going to happen. You're never going to go to a business and say, I want to spend £10 million tomorrow, please, Mr. Finance, Mr. CFO. The right approach to it is to say, we need to pick this low-hanging fruit first, then we'll stop, we'll check. We'll go through the process again. It's an iterative process. What more do we need to do? What can we do next? So we'll do lighting in 2025. We'll look at our ventilation in 2026. We'll look at our travel during 2026 alongside it. That makes a big difference. We'll have a look at our waste and have a look at what BIFA do for us as compared to other organisations. And it forms a coherent path. A path to 2035, wherever you set your ambition, that says, over those years, if I do this in a staged plan, that's going to cost this, I can get to net zero, I can meet that ambition. This, Mr. Business Owner, is my plan. This is how I get there. So it all comes together in a strategy board pack. The answer to that initial question is where I start. Where do I start? The answer to that initial question of where do I start is at the beginning. A very wise person once said that in, which musical was it? Either way, start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. But the important thing is to know why you're getting there. Make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure that you have the ambition, the vision. You know why you're doing it. Things flounder because there's no coherent strategy behind it. So ultimately, it comes down to getting everybody on board. Making sure that everything is fully documented, that you have a solid business case that can't be denied. Everyone knows why they're doing it, what it's going to cost, what actions are going to be taken when, and everybody can sign off on it. And that's ultimately how net zero transition occurs. Finish with a quote from Sir David Attenborough. I always use Sir David Attenborough in sustainability presentations because he's the one person in this country everyone trusts. But Yeah, many individuals are doing what they can, and that ultimately is very good. But real success can only come if there's a change in our societies and in our economics and in our politics. It all needs to come together. So businesses, you need to play your part. You can do it. You just need the right plan.